Hey y'all. So, given the conversation happening due to DJ Vlad's sarcastic tweet about Megan Thee Stallion and the Tory Lanez situation, I thought this would be a good time to re-release my Imperfect Victim episode on Megan Thee Stallion. Given the fact that once again we find our culture so quick to start questioning the veracity of a Black woman's physical assault and subsequent psychological warfare enacted on her by both the perpetrator and the wider culture, where they demeaned her, diminished her, abused her psychologically, and refused to believe that a verifiable fact with hard evidence, including the perpetrator calling her friend from jail, Kelsey, and apologizing for what he did. People refuse to believe that that happened. So I thought this would be a good time for us to readdress this topic so that we can move forward as a culture and as a society. So without further ado, here's my Imperfect Victim series on Megan Thee Stallion. Hi all. Welcome to part 2 of my Megan Thee Stallion Imperfect Victim series. Today we are addressing the and this episode of my Imperfect Victim series for Megan Thee Stallion is called Misogynoir, Intersexual Invisibility, and the Refusal to Believe Megan. So let's get started. So what happened to Megan Thee Stallion was a straight up cultural failure, in my opinion. It wasn't just a celebrity scandal. It was honestly one of the most visible moral failings of our society because millions of people openly justified and minimized against a Black woman. And the most disturbing part of this dehumanization is that it came from within the Black community itself, where multiple people actually argued that she deserved what happened to her. They mocked her. They insisted she was lying despite verifiable evidence to the contrary. Listen, and as for me, as a tall, independent, strong-willed, loud Black woman myself, I can't lie, I took that shit pretty personally, okay? And I will never forget the people who were pointing to her and calling her a liar. I think that a lot of Black women who demographically kind of fit the same demographic as Megan probably feel the same way. So anyway, let's get started. So Megan's rise to fame between 2018 and 2020 as a darker-skinned, autonomous rapper who basically flipped her male vibrato back onto men was highly entertaining and made her very popular, but also I think created a sort of seed of cultural resentment that later she reaped like 100-fold. That was all 100% based in misogynoir. I think her confidence, her height, her independence, and her sexual agency made her threatening within a misogynoir and misogyny framework long before the shooting ever happened. And I think that she became, in a way, a symbolic target for people who just resent Black women who refuse to play it small, be grateful, be quiet, or be apologetic. So let's actually talk about what happened the night of the shooting. The shooting occurred in 2020 after a night at Kylie Jenner's house during a chaotic moment between her, Tory Lanez, and Kelsey, involving alcohol, interpersonal conflict, and betrayal among people close to her, and betrayal that she was, quite frankly, part of too, you know? But that doesn't mean that she deserved to get. What actually happened is that Tory Lanez pulled out a gun off the ground and the bullet fragments struck Megan's foot, which is supported by physical evidence, medical records, and later court filings. He fired a gun and bullet fragments entered her foot. He her, okay? It's not debatable. It's not a question, and it's been proven in court, okay? I don't have to say allegedly because it's been proven in court, okay? Done. I think that the mistake that Megan made, I don't know that it was a mistake because it was coming from a place of protectiveness, is that she initially did not say who her or tell the truth to the police or really to the public about the shooting because this was in the George Floyd era, height of Black Lives Matter, so much instability going on in society, and so much people were actively talking about police against Black people and especially Black men. And I think it was literally out of a space of community loyalty and code. It wasn't coming from a space of deception. It was coming from a space of trying to protect this guy. But I think then she learned the hard way that he did not deserve to be protected. Because as soon as she realized that he was going to twist the narrative and try to destroy her reputation in order to protect his own, then she decided to tell the truth publicly. But because she had initially said something else, and because people fundamentally didn't want to believe her because of who she is in society, things like backfired. And I think literally that that's what happened. So people took her initial denial, or basically initial refusal to directly say what happened, and basically used it as proof that her entire story was fake, even though trauma will routinely disrupt memory, consistency, and decision making. Survivors will often minimize things, protect their abusers, delay disclosure, which is commonplace in trauma. But yet, for whatever reason, Megan was treated as uniquely untrustworthy for behavior that, quite frankly, is clinically normal. And this is where I believe intersectional invisibility kicks in, because her trauma did not register as legitimate to people who already view her as morally suspect because she was a autonomous, tall, unapologetic Black woman who basically rapped about men and in a way that I think society deemed like devalued her. That's my honest opinion. There's a few sociological theories that I think explain what happened to Megan Thee Stallion. And the first I want to talk about here is script theory. Script theory basically explains how society frames autonomous women as always available, always consenting, and always responsible for whatever happens to them. It's sort of the explanation for why every time there's like a burger, for instance, gets killed, nobody cares. Like, I think that this theory applies to Megan Thee Stallion because I think because Megan raps openly about, people interpreted her as an invitation to violence rather than like a neutral human trait. And I think that confidence was used as evidence that she couldn't possibly be a victim, which quite frankly is logic, basically disguised as pop culture commentary. I'm just being honest. I also think that Megan was placed into like the Jezebel stereotype archetype, which basically historically exists to justify violence against Black women and absolve any perpetrators of any sort of guilt, right? Her history was explicitly used against her, not only in the trial of public opinion, but also in the trial itself and in court, where she was like humiliated and her whole history was brought up as if that was any evidence to like state that the crime that happened against her like didn't happen. So because she's like slept with multiple men, that means that she deserved to be shot. Okay, cool. Thanks, guys. You. Anyway, the logic was clear basically. Because she was not, quote, innocent, then her pain did not count. And I found that to be abhorrent and disgusting. And like I said, I remember all of you who talked about her. I haven't forgotten, and I still side eye every last one of you. I do. I hate talking about this, guys. This story is like triggering as fuck. I'm not gonna lie. As a Black woman, it's awful. Okay. The disbelief with Megan Thee Stallion escalated to basically outright denial, and where people were actually claiming that she was never and she actually stepped on glass. She was basically forced to release private medical records just to prove that she had blood fragments in her foot, and people still did not believe her, which is actually disgusting and horrific to anybody with an actual functioning moral compass. But because it's a Black woman, autonomy involved, nobody has a functional moral compass, right? No amount of evidence that she offered was ever enough because the disbelief was not about facts. It was about misogynoir, and it was about who she was as a person. And misogynoir, I really do believe, explains why her pain was treated as negotiable and her suffering as optional for who actually deserves empathy. People framed her as aggressive, manipulative, dramatic, playing victim, instead of injured, terrified, traumatized, and alone without her mom or anybody who loved her, because she lost all of the people close to her in rapid succession prior to being catapulted to fame, which, by the way, is inherently traumatic, which is what we'll be talking about in part 3. And I think her confidence and her sexual agency, again, made her unrecognizable as a victim in a culture that only protects like submissive women. And then also, respectability politics, I feel, played a role in this. Under respectability politics, basically empathy is conditional for Black women, and it's only extended to women, Black women who are pure, passive, compliant, and who fit into the narrow construct of what we are allowed to be in society. I think Megan violated a lot of the, quote, respectability politics rule by being loud, rich, and unapologetic, which made her disposable, I believe, in the public imagination, even when she was quite literally bleeding, literally and also spiritually, emotionally, and psychologically. That girl was very young when all this happened, and she was clearly suffering, and nobody cared. No one cared. I think Megan is kind of the ultimate imperfect victim because she was not perfect, calm, consistent, or polite in the aftermath of being, which made people feel entitled to abandon her. She spiraled. She was messy. She got into conflict. Her story was inconsistent. She didn't want to admit to her entire like history. You know what I mean? Like, but none of those things mean that she didn't get, you know what I mean? It means that she's a human being who was suffering and honestly didn't have a parental figure or anybody who she could trust around her to support her during this time. Her trauma, her drinking, her grief, and her interpersonal conflicts were basically used to disqualify her from victimhood, which is the exact definition of an imperfect victim. I feel like Megan Thee Stallion is one of like the ultimate examples of an imperfect victim because she's someone whose suffering was treated as invalid because their behavior was not morally pristine. A core truth that people don't want to face is that autonomous Black women are often placed outside the category of people who are worth protecting. Her case, I believe, shows how society expects violence to happen to women like her and then punishes them for surviving it. And I think this refusal to believe her was not about evidence, it was about misogynoir. That's it for part 2. In part 3, we're going to talk about how her trauma, grief, addiction, and fame shaped Megan's behavior during this period. And we're going to examine why people judge survivors by their worst moments instead of by the harm that they endured. We're also going to unpack why grace is systematically denied to Black women that are in the most need of it. So I hope you guys join me for part 3 as well, and I hope you enjoyed this video. This was hard for me to film. It was deeply triggering, but I feel that this story really needed to be told. So anyway, I'll see you guys next time. Bye.